I was 15 years old when I learned how quickly love can disappear. It was a Tuesday evening, ordinary in every way. My school bag lay by the door, my shoes kicked off like always, and the sound of my mother stirring something on the stove filled the house. If I close my eyes, I can still remember how safe everything felt in that moment, like nothing bad could ever touch me inside those walls. But I was carrying a secret that made my chest feel too tight to breathe. For weeks, I had tried to convince myself I was wrong. I counted days, made excuses, prayed silently every night. But the truth didn't disappear just because I was afraid of it. I was pregnant. In 10th grade. A child myself, about to have a child. I waited until dinner was over. My parents sat across from me, tired from work, unaware that their daughter's life was about to split into a before and after. My hands were shaking so badly I had to press them together under the table. "I need to tell you something," I said. My voice sounded small, like it belonged to someone else. My mother sighed, already annoyed. "What now?" That was the moment I should have known how this would end. The words fell out of my mouth in a rush, clumsy and scared. "I'm pregnant." At first, there was silence. Heavy. Crushing. Then my mother laughed, a short, sharp sound that didn't reach her eyes. "That's not funny," she said. "I'm not joking," I whispered. Everything exploded after that. My father stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. His face turned red, his jaw clenched like he was holding back something violent. He didn't ask how. He didn't ask why. He didn't ask if I was scared. Instead, he said, "You've shamed this family." My mother started crying, not for me, but for herself. "Do you know what people will say about us?" she shouted. "We didn't raise you like this." I tried to speak. I tried to explain that I was terrified, that I didn't know what to do, that I needed them. But every word I said was drowned out by anger and blame. "You're throwing your life away," my father said. "You're disgusting," my mother added. Each sentence felt like a door slamming shut. Then came the sentence that changed everything. "You can't stay here," my father said coldly. "Pack your things." I stared at him, certain I had misheard. "What?" "You made this choice," he replied. "Now live with it." "We won't." My mother wouldn't even look at me as I packed a small bag. No hug. No goodbye. No last piece of advice. Just the sound of the front door opening and the night air rushing in to swallow me whole. I stepped outside with nowhere to go. 15 years old. Pregnant. Disowned. As the door closed behind me, I realized something terrifying and clear: the people who were supposed to protect me had chosen their pride over my life. And from that moment on, I knew I was on my own. The first night after I left my parents' house was the coldest night of my life. Not because of the weather, but because I finally understood what alone really meant. I sat on a bus bench with my small bag at my feet, watching headlights blur past, feeling invisible to the world. My phone was almost dead. I had no plan, no money, and nowhere to go. Every adult I had ever trusted had vanished in a single evening. I wrapped my arms around my stomach, barely showing but already heavy with fear. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the life inside me. "I'll figure this out." I didn't know how, but I meant it. The days that followed were survival, minute by minute. I stayed with friends until their parents asked questions. I slept on couches where I tried not to cry into borrowed pillows. Sometimes I went hungry because I was embarrassed to ask for food. People stared at me when they noticed my belly, their eyes full of judgment instead of concern. I learned quickly that sympathy had limits. Some told me I should fix it. Others said I deserved what happened. Teachers avoided my eyes. Adults spoke about me like I wasn't in the room. But every time someone looked at me like I was a mistake, I remembered the tiny heartbeat growing inside me. And I refused to believe my child was a mistake. I found a small shelter that accepted young mothers. The room was cramped, the walls thin, but it was safe. I slept on a narrow bed and listened to other girls cry at night, all of us carrying stories too heavy for our age. Pregnancy was harder than I imagined. My body changed faster than my mind could keep up. I was exhausted, nauseous, scared all the time. Sometimes I cried quietly into my pillow so no one would hear. I missed my mother more than I wanted to admit. I missed the version of my father who used to carry me on his shoulders when I was little. But those people no longer existed, or maybe they never had. I went to school as long as I could. My grades slipped. My dreams blurred. But I held on to one promise: I would not let my child grow up feeling unwanted. When my son was born, everything changed. The moment they placed him in my arms, the world went silent. He was small and warm and real. His fingers curled around mine like he already trusted me with his life. And in that moment, I stopped being just a scared girl. I became a mother. I named him something strong, something hopeful, because I wanted his life to begin with meaning. I looked at his tiny face and felt a love so fierce it terrified me. I had nothing, but somehow, holding him, I felt rich. I didn't know how I would raise him. I didn't know where we would live or how I would survive. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. No matter how hard life became, I would never walk away from him. Because even when everyone else turned their back on me, this child chose me. And that made me stronger than I had ever been before. Raising a child when you are still a child yourself teaches you lessons no one prepares you for. The first few years blurred together in a mix of exhaustion and determination. I worked wherever someone would hire me, cleaning offices before sunrise, serving food with aching feet, folding clothes late into the night. Every paycheck was carefully divided between rent, diapers, food, and childcare. There was never anything left for me, and somehow, that felt right. I learned to survive on very little sleep. I learned how to stretch a meal into two. I learned how to smile when I wanted to collapse. But most importantly, I learned that love could be stronger than fear. My son grew fast. He took his first steps in a tiny apartment with cracked walls and a leaky sink. His laughter filled spaces that would have otherwise felt empty. When he looked at me, his eyes never saw a failure. He saw safety. He saw home. That alone kept me going. I went back to school when he was old enough for daycare. I studied after he fell asleep, textbooks spread across the kitchen table, my eyes burning with fatigue. Some nights, I cried over the pages, wondering if it was worth it. But every time I thought about quitting, I pictured his future, and I kept reading. Years passed. Slowly, life began to change. I earned my degree. Then another certification. I found work that paid more than just survival wages. The day I signed the lease on a better apartment, I sat on the floor and cried, not out of sadness, but relief. For the first time, I felt like we were moving forward instead of just staying afloat. My parents never reached out. No birthdays. No holidays. No acknowledgement that I existed. There were moments when that hurt more than hunger ever had. When my son asked why other kids had grandparents and he didn't, my throat tightened. I chose my words carefully. Some people don't know how to love the right way, I told him. But that doesn't mean they don't miss out. I refused to let bitterness poison him. As he grew older, my son became everything I had hoped for and more. He was kind to strangers, patient with people who struggled, and serious about his dreams. He worked hard in school, not because I forced him, but because he had seen effort up close his entire life. One evening, when he was about 16, he looked at me and said, "Mom, you're my hero." I had to turn away so he wouldn't see me cry. By then, my life no longer looked like a tragedy. It looked like a quiet success. Not the kind people brag about, but the kind built brick by brick, without applause. I had a stable job. A peaceful home. A son who trusted me completely. I didn't need my parents anymore. The girl they threw out at 15 was gone. In her place stood a woman who had built a future from nothing but willpower and love. And without realizing it, I had already won, long before they ever came back. The knock came on a quiet Sunday afternoon. I remember it clearly because nothing in my life felt loud or chaotic anymore. My home was calm. My son was visiting a friend. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, and for once, I wasn't rushing, worrying, or surviving. I was simply living. When I opened the door, my breath caught in my throat. They stood there, older, smaller somehow, as if time had slowly taken pieces of them away. My parents. The same people who had shut the door on me 20 years earlier now stood on the other side of it, waiting. For a moment, no one spoke. My mother's eyes filled with tears immediately. My father's shoulders were stiff, his hands folded like he didn't know where to put them. They looked nothing like the towering figures who once scared me into silence. "We heard, you have a son," my mother finally said. Her voice shook. "Our grandson." That word, "our," hit harder than any insult ever had. I felt no anger. No panic. Just a strange calm, like the storm had already passed long ago. I stepped aside and let them in. They looked around my home slowly, taking in the framed photos on the wall, the neat shelves, the warmth. Their eyes paused on certificates, on pictures of my son growing year by year. They were witnessing a life they had chosen not to be part of. When my son came home, the room changed. He was tall now, confident in a quiet way. He greeted them politely, offering his hand without hesitation. "Hello," he said. "You must be my grandparents." My mother broke down completely. They had expected something else. A broken boy. A resentful young man. Someone damaged by the choices they made. Instead, they saw the result of unconditional love. My father asked him about school, about his plans, his future. My son answered with humility and pride. When he spoke about wanting to help others who felt lost or abandoned, I saw my parents exchange glances they couldn't hide. That was when the apologies came. They said they were afraid back then. That they didn't know what to do. That they regretted everything. I listened without interrupting. And then I spoke. "I was 15, I said calmly. I needed parents. I needed protection. You chose pride instead. I survived without you. I raised him without you. And while I forgive you for my own peace, that doesn't mean you get to rewrite history." Silence filled the room. "I won't take revenge," I continued. "Because I don't need to. The life you're seeing now, the son you're proud of, that is something I built alone." Tears streamed down my mother's face. My father finally lowered his head. When they left, they hugged my son. He hugged them back, kindly, without bitterness. That was who he was. After the door closed, I leaned against it and exhaled. There was no victory speech. No dramatic ending. Just peace. They had come expecting to reclaim something. Instead, they saw the cost of walking away. And I stood there, in the quiet of my home, knowing the truth. I wasn't the girl they abandoned anymore. I was the woman who survived, the mother who stayed, and the proof that love, when chosen, can change everything.